Valdez was the second stop on my family and I's trip to Alaska, and boy was it worth it. So this is what you should know before you go to Valdez. To get to Valdez, we drove all the way from Denali down to Valdez, and that was a long drive, but is really scenic because it has mountain ranges and it has prairies, and there's just so many different ecosystems for you to see. There wasn't much wildlife, which we are kind of surprised because we saw a lot of like moose hunting stuff, but that wasn't a huge deal. Now, if you go this way, make sure you fill up on gas before you get on Denali Highway, because there's one gas station in kind of the middle of nowhere on that highway, and then the next one isn't until pretty far off the highway. When we went, we did not fill up on gas, and we almost ran out. We were literally running on fumes once we got off Denali Highway, like hoping a gas station would come up really quick. Thankfully it did, so we didn't get stranded. But just a little tip, make sure you fill up. Once we got to Valdez, we took the Lulu Belle Glacier tour. And this is a must-do. Trust me, it is spectacular. The Lulu Belle's captain is Captain Fred, and he does like to talk a lot, like the reviews say. Now, this may seem like a bad thing, but you don't actually have to listen to the whole thing. And when you do listen, he is so knowledgeable about everything he's saying that it's worth it. He has so much experience. Captain Fred has been doing these tours since 1979. That's crazy. And so obviously he knows what he's talking about, knows where to go, and you're going to have a great time. It's a one-day tour, and it says it takes about 6 hours, but Captain Fred doesn't stick to this tightly. This may seem weird and like a no-no, but it's worth it, because his thought is that if you see puffins, you're going to want to stop and see the puffins. You're not going to be like, oh, well, that's 5 minutes, that's all we have. And that's what he does. He spends the time needed to truly take in everything you're seeing and not feel like you're so rushed. Although it may not be actually 6 hours, just plan the day to do this because it is so worth it. On our cruise, we saw so much wildlife. We saw puffins that he actually like maneuvered the boat so close that you could practically touch them. We saw sea otters. One was on its back eating a crab, and we saw seals too, a whole bunch of them just barking away on shore and sunbathing. It was awesome, and he really took the time to properly experience these. Now the Lulu Belle is pretty small, but don't let that deter you because it's nice and personal, not a lot of people on board, and you really get to get close to things. Because of its size, that's how he got so close to puffins, so you could practically touch them. And a little tip, on the way to the glacier, there's a stretch where all you do is drive. And it can get really cold. My dad and I stayed outside thinking it can't be that much longer. We're fine. Like, we'll be there soon. And we were freezing. So make sure you go inside during this part because otherwise you're going to be too cold when you get to the glacier to be able to actually look at the glacier and watch it and look for calving. On this stretch, you go through a massive ice field. And Captain Fred points out where the glacier used to be when he started his tours in 1979. Columbia Glacier is the glacier you see, and it is retreating fairly quickly. It's retreated 12 miles since Captain Fred started his tour. That's a lot. Columbia Glacier itself is 386 miles. That's huge. Obviously, you don't get to see all of it because that would be very impractical. But you do get to see the face of it, and that's where the magic happens. Glaciers do this thing called calving. That's when chunks of ice fall off and fall into the water. When they do this, it sounds like a gunshot goes off because there's a loud like crack and a boom, and then it hits the water and splashes. Some calving is pretty small. It's just a few chunks here and there. And sometimes you're lucky and you get to see these massive calvings. Calvings are kind of sad because that means the glacier is retreating, but they're pretty cool to see, and it's nature in its finest. If you do the Lulu Belle, I recommend just doing that for the day because it can get exhausting being out on the water all day long. After our cruise, I was so tired that I just wanted some food and to go to bed. Once we got back on dry land, we ate at the Fat Mermaid. It's this cute little bar that has live music and has some really good food. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit and talk about right before you get into Valdez. To get to Valdez, you have to go through the Keystone Canyon, and it's beautiful. So make sure you don't sleep through it and actually look and see the nature around you because it's canyons and forests, and it's just spectacular. There's even different pull-offs, and waterfalls that you can stop in and get some really cool pictures at. And when you're driving, I really recommend not just driving, but actually pulling over and stopping to see some of this stuff. It may seem like kind of inconvenient because you're trying to get to your destination, but you got to remember, part of your trip is the journey to there, and it is so beautiful that it's worth it. Also, just outside of Valdez is Worthington Glacier, and this has a really good hike you can do. My family and I didn't do all of this. We just went a little ways because we were on our way back to Anchorage to pick up my brother. But if you do this hike, make sure you're properly prepared. Bring water, bring snacks, and bring proper layers because you hike up to the glacier and it can get pretty cold. There's one more thing in Valdez you should do, but only if you like it. I don't like fishing, so we didn't rent a fishing charter and go out on the water to fish. But if you like fishing, do it because you get to keep some of the salmon that you catch, and it makes for really good meat. But at the end of the day, if you go to Valdez, the one thing you have to do is the Lulu Belle. I cannot speak more nice things about this because we had such a great time and got to see so much. It can get a little expensive, but it's worth it. And even if you go to Valdez just for the cruise, do it because I had so much fun and you will too. Obviously, I didn't cover everything today, but these are the things that my family did and that I enjoyed. I've included a link in the description to everything I talked about for your convenience. And if you like what you saw today, please hit that like button, consider subscribing, and enjoy your trip to Valdez.